I am going to start my video here and we will see how this goes. I was clicking around and I clicked on the wrong thing and ended it before, but I didn't want people to leave not realizing what was going on either. So thank you all for joining me this evening. This is Stories Around the Campfire, and it's going to focus on my Alaska journey, which was phenomenal. And I am going to focus on about 10 photos, maybe throw a few extra in for the story. Still going through my photos. I've got fabulous photos from this wonderful trip. The trip was everything I'd hoped for and even more. I think I'll be going through photos for a while. But obviously, as you're taking the photos, there's those moments that you know are going to be special that you capture. And several of these were ones that I knew were going to be favorites before I ever looked at them on my computer. And I didn't get time to look while I was on my trip. We were staying up really late most every night. It never got dark. So at 11:30 at night, we were still out taking pictures. And most mornings I got up around 4:30, 5 at the latest to head out and take more pictures. So had lots of wonderful journeys. Just to let you know a little bit of how I'm going to do this, I'm going to go through about 10 photos, tell you a little bit of the story about it, and then I've got something special for you at the end, so make sure you stay till the end. The first one, I'm going to go sort of in sequential order of how things happened on my trip. I'm not going to hit every day. I was there for about 16 days of photography, had some travel days in there too, and took pictures that I loved every single day. There's just no way that y'all would want to sit through it. Well, maybe you would, but I just wasn't going to hit one for every day. But I did want to start out with, flew into Anchorage and then drove down to Seward. And I took about a day and a half to do that. It's just a couple-hour drive, but I stopped at every single pull-off. I had a photographer friend who said, that's what you need to do, and she gave me some specific places to stop, and I did. I camped along the way. I stopped near Portage Glacier the first night, and in pouring rain, camped in the back of my, actually ended up with a minivan that night, and I camped in the back, and it was still a neat experience. The drive was beautiful. I stopped at a lot of spots. Got up early the next morning, and that whole area was beautiful. At that time, I didn't go through the Whittier Tunnel and on to Whittier, but I did do that in a couple more days. Did go to the glacier. There was ice in the lake, which was wonderful. And then I headed on down to Seward. And again, I was stopping at just about every location I could. And there was these ponds along the road, and the highway was called Turnagain Arm. And there was all these pull-offs, and there was these ponds and all sorts of fun things to look at. And I passed one pond, and there was a trumpeter swan, and I stopped, but the swan was too far away and didn't really get any shots, and I heard I had just missed some moose, which I hadn't seen moose yet. So I was a little disappointed in that. And I went on up the road and drove past some more ponds. And I realized as I passed where you could pull in that there were several swans out on the pond and in the grass area. So I found a place to turn around and headed back and parked. And I walked along the ponds until I found a good spot. And they really put on a show. Let's see if I can get to the first one I wanted to talk about. This is what I wanted to show multiple pictures of because it was just such a phenomenal experience. This one swan was out in the water, and he kept dipping. I'm not sure why I'm getting this one. I want to show up. He kept dipping his wings in the water. He would dive down and come back up and spread his wings out and splash water all around. And it was really pretty amazing. There he is. And he went on and did this for about 10, 15 minutes. It's like it was a ritual. And at first I thought he was just bathing. I need to get my head out of the picture. He was just bathing, but then I finally decided that maybe this was part of a mating ritual. The other swans had all moved back up into the grass. And he went on and on and on and dove and splashed water and dove and splashed water. And finally he did go over to where the other swans where he moved up into the grass and spread out his wings and fluttered around. And unfortunately, the swan that he was making eyes with and spreading his wings over decided that he really didn't like it too much, or the one next to him decided didn't like it. I assume it was another male. And he chased him all the way back in the water, not just into the water, but he chased him for about 20, 30 feet way out into the water away from what I assume was a female that they were courting. So I got to watch this. I was probably spent about 30 minutes getting to watch these trumpeter swans going on and on and on. And that was just an absolutely fabulous experience. So that was my first picture of the evening is the swan song. And so if you've got interest in any of these pictures, make sure you take a note of what I call, and there's the name Swan Song. This is number one because I might give you an opportunity later if you would like to buy these. Of course, all of them are up on my website. So anyway, we will move on. As I was driving down the Turnagain Arm Road, I had been told that I needed to stop and hike down through the woods down to the Kenai Lake. And there wasn't any good place along the Turnagain Arm to get down to the lake. So you look for places that other people had pulled off and hope that maybe they had created a path down. And I did that, and when I got down there was a railroad track. And wasn't something that I wanted to get on. And number one, you're not allowed to take pictures off of the railroad tracks, but I didn't want to get on to get to the other side because then there was a drop off down into the lake. So I stopped at several different spots, and I really love this spot. This is one of my favorite photos of the whole trip, where I was catching beautiful light on the curve of the tracks that led to this beautiful scene of snow-covered mountains And of course, the reflection in the lake and the clouds were just fascinating. And I was having rain off and on. It would rain some and then it'd clear off and we'd get the scattered blue sky. And then it would rain some more and then do that. And by the afternoon, as I was getting closer to Seward, the rain did finally stop, but it made for some real interesting clouds. So this one's called Around the Bend. And to me, it just talks of the journey that I had. You don't really know where those train tracks are going, but they're beautiful and it makes you want to go. And it's surrounded by all this beauty, and the whole trip was that way. It was just one unknown after another, but one fascinating, beautiful experience each time I went around the bend. So this photo just sort of indicates how I feel about the whole trip. I joined a photo tour group with Lisa Langell and Magic of Alaska, and this one was focused on shooting wildlife. And David was with us too, and it was just fabulous. It was 8 days, 5 days on the Kenai Peninsula, and then 3 days photographing bears. And one of the first things we did was hit a beach that there were eagles. And they would come in and feed off of the fish that were left as scraps from the charter boats. The charter boats would go out, and when they came back in, they'd fillet the fish, and then the scraps would be left, and the eagles would come in. But they were there even when the scraps were around. It was fascinating. They would come in, they would dwell in the cliffs back behind us, and then they would come in to the ocean. In the backdrop, I wish I'd thought to stick a picture in. The backdrop was these 3 volcanoes, 2 of which were active, and there was smoke rising out of them. And they were mountains that had snow on them and such. So I did capture some photos of these beautiful, beautiful bald eagles with those mountains and volcanoes in the background. But this one was coming in for a landing, and I think he was hoping to get a fish. And I just love capturing them in action. And if you can zoom in on this, which I know that a lot of you might be on phones and such, but his talons were fascinating. The talons are about 2 inches long on these birds, and I sure wouldn't want to be grabbed by them for sure. But we were able to get fairly close to these eagles and sit out on the beach area, which I think you saw in my little pre-video, and I'll play it again at the end. And we would sit out, and sometimes we'd find a log or something. Sometimes we'd just actually be sitting out on the beach and try to get down on eye level with these eagles that were coming in. We saw lots and lots of eagles. I've seen a lot in this area, but it was just so fascinating to see them on the ocean, flying over the water, waves coming in, volcanoes in the background. It was just a wonderful experience. So this is coming in. Then the next day on our photo tour, we were able to get out on the boat, and we went down to Seward and had a charter boat. And I found out that it's really cold out on that water. I thought I had plenty of layers and such, but I was a bit chilly. I mean, the adrenaline was so high as we were out on these boats photographing everything that you really didn't think about the cold too much. But I did think that probably could have done a few more layers. But anyway, this was one of those shots that I knew when I took it that I was going to love. There's an area in this Resurrection Bay area called Spire Cove. And this is what they call a spire, and it's these big rock, I don't know that outcroppings is the correct word, but they're actually islands that are rock. And how in the world trees grew on this, or any type of vegetation, is beyond me, because there's nothing there but rock, and there obviously must be some thin layer of soil on the top for these trees to grab hold of. And you would even see trees coming out the side of these rocks. And we had started out with a little rainy, cloudy morning, and so the clouds were hanging low as we were going out in the boat. And this is probably about, I don't remember how far out now. I'm going to say 30 minutes, but I really don't remember. All the different days start running together. But the clouds were still hanging real low. So there are mountains back behind there. You can just see them peeking through with the snow and the crevices and such. But that island wasn't affected by the clouds and was just absolutely beautiful. And this one, and I'll show you in a while, really looks beautiful big. have already printed one great big, and I don't know that you'll be able to appreciate it as from the screen, but I'll try to see if I can maybe pick it up here real quick. This is a 24 by 36. It's not even going to fit in the screen, but it is just absolutely beautiful. I did this for a client, and he wanted a great big piece, and this was the one that we both knew hands down it needed to be. Now I don't got to figure out where to put this. But that was on canvas, and I did a special framing called a floater frame for him, and it really turned out beautiful. And this is a piece that I am actually going to print for myself and have at home. I'm going to be doing it on satin metal because it gives the feeling of the fog, and then a simple black frame. But this was just a magical moment. And while we were out on these boats, we saw all sorts of wildlife. We saw all sorts of gulls. We saw sea otters. We saw whales. We even saw killer whales while we were out on this. We saw a whole school of orca. I think, if I remember right, there might have been like as many as 8. I know for sure there were 5, and I'm drawing a blank right now. But getting to see the whales, we saw dolphins. These are the black and white dolphins, and they swam along with our boat, as you can see. You've seen that on TV. They really did that, and it was really fun trying to film them, but they'd stay underwater mostly, and just every once in a while they'd rise up to the surface. So we saw so many fabulous things on this trip. If you want to go out on a boat, this was definitely the place to do it. We spent most of the day out on the water, and it was just phenomenal. I would go back tomorrow and do the same boat ride again. It was just really fantastic. Life is good. This is a fun one. I had a blast with the otters. We saw otters on the day with the trip to Seward, but then we went to Homer and we took a boat out, and we went to what's called Gull Island. And this was fabulous. This is about 3 miles, I think they said, from Homer Spit, and there's like 20,000 birds that nest on these rocks. And you talk about loud, just constant noise out on the water. But it was fascinating. But there were all sorts of fun little sea otters around the islands, and we got to sit and watch them. And they were so fun. This one was laughing at us. I hear they're actually pretty mean little critters, but you would never know it from watching them. There'd be 2 of them, and one would just be spinning and spinning and spinning, and he'd flip around this way and then down another way, and the other one would just look at him like, leave me alone, go away. And they were fascinating, but this one definitely had a smile on his face. We even got to see a mama with a baby on her chest, which was a lot of fun to watch. I could have spent hours just watching the otters, and I had a lot of fun. As many places where I thought about it, I tried to take some video, and it was so much fun videoing these little guys and coming back and watching them later. But he definitely had a smile on his face, and life was good. One of the things that we really were looking for were all the birds, and this, as I mentioned, was sort of a wildlife tour, and we had several birders on board. I was pretty ignorant. I knew a few of the birds that we were looking for, and I knew one that I wanted to see on this trip was a puffin. I didn't know much about puffins. I didn't have a clue if we'd even see them. I heard that I should if we were down there. Well, we definitely got to see our puffins. We got to see them 2 different days, and found out there was 2 different types of puffins that we saw. This is the tufted puffin. We also saw the horned puffin, and this one was out floating in the water and had gathered up, I don't know if it's seaweed or grass or some type of something, and it's obvious that he was getting ready to go back and work on his nest. And this was in the area where there was the 20,000 birds, and I'm not sure where he was going to find a spot, but the detail on him was phenomenal. The colors, I love the little tuft going back. The horned puffins have more of a black, I'm not good at describing. My birder friends could tell you exactly what everything's called and such, but it was so much fun. It was really fun trying to capture them in flight, and I did catch a few of them, but this one I just loved the mouthful of grass, and it just spoke to me, so it was pretty fun. Then we got to go do the bears. I've left several days out. We got to go to Skiliak Lake, and we got to go out on the Kenai River. Saw lots of wonderful wildlife. But one of the big draws for me on this trip was getting to go photograph the bears. And we had to fly across to the Shenandoah Bay, which is Lake Clark National Park. And I know I probably am butchering names. I've done that all along. But then got to spend 2 days photographing the bears. And we were at a lodge, and then we took a bus to the several different locations to photograph the bears. And this location, we had a double view. We could look out to this big, huge open field, and there was a river running through it. And the bears primarily were on the far side. And anytime we might see 30 bears. And they were doing a little of everything. There were some that were laying on their backs with all 4 legs up in the air, scratching their backs. There were some that were doing things I'm not going to mention. There were some that would come up to the water's edge and get into the water and then get out and shake. Then there was this big tall grass area that was right near us. And this bear came into this area, and we were trying to get photos through the tall grass and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if he would stand up? And he did. This is one of my favorite bear shots. Called it on the lookout. He was just getting up over that grass trying to see what all was going on. He really wasn't too concerned about us. He was looking out in the field and checking out what the other bears were doing. And this was just an absolutely fabulous experience. We did have a local guide with us. He made sure that we followed very strict rules, and there was things we could and couldn't do. We had to stay with the group. We couldn't go out on our own. Even when we were at the lodge, there was a stream right near my room that he said the bears like to wander up and down. So as soon as you open your door from your lodge, your cabin room, you check and make sure there's not a bear right outside the door, which was definitely a interesting experience. But these bears were just phenomenal to watch. And in the evenings, they would come down, and I say evenings, we're talking 10 o'clock at night, depending on the tides and such, they would come down and go clamming, which was a lot of fun to capture. They would go out into the water where there's just a really thin level of water, or the water just really puddles in a lot of places. And they would dig up clams, and it amazed me how they would just go scoop, and all of a sudden they'd have the clam eaten and be on to the next, and you never really could see how they were managing to get the goods out of the shell, but they did, and they would go out and go clamming. But my favorite part of the bear experience was, and I've shared, if you've been following me on Facebook, I've shared some video and such, was on the second evening, and it was getting fairly late at night. It was golden hour, which was 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night. I'm not sure exactly what time it was, but it was pretty late. The sun was getting low, and it would get behind the mountains and get that glow, but it would never completely set. And I think the darkest times, if I remember right, were around 1, 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. It never got pitch black dark like we were used to it. And so we were still out at 10 o'clock at night. And our group split in two, and half of us went down to where the water was, and another half stayed up at the field. And again, we stayed as groups just to make sure we were safe, safety in numbers. And so we went down and we're photographing these bears that were clamming. And there was this one bear, it was a sow, kept looking back behind us, which made us sort of nervous. We weren't really quite sure what she was looking for. At first we thought she was looking at us, then we realized she didn't even care that we were there. She was looking back behind us, and it was as if she was looking for another bear. And sure enough, here came another bear from the other direction. So we were scooting in together, madly clicking pictures, wondering why she was so interested in this other bear and what that was going to mean when the other bear arrived. And we just really didn't quite know, but we were pretty excited. And sure enough, they joined at down near the water's edge, and they cuddled with each other. And we finally decided that maybe they were siblings, 4 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old. I mean, they were big bears. They were definitely something that we needed to be aware of. And be very cautious around. But the bears were oblivious to us. They cuddled, and then they played, and then they cuddled, and then they played. And when I'm talking about playing, it reminded me of two cats playing. They would paw at each other. They would grab each other by the neck and pull each other down. They would knock each other over. Then they'd cuddle some more, and then they'd go out into the water just a little bit, and then they'd come back together. And we watched this for over an hour. It might have been an hour and a half. We were long past the time of being back. When we were supposed to be back at the lodge, we had to get up early the next morning. I think we were out there maybe till close to 11:30 at night. None of us really wanted to leave, but it was just amazing to watch these bears, not just for a few minutes, but for a whole hour playing like this. It was just one of those experiences that I will never forget. But I especially love this picture. I never have thought of bears being cuddly. I mean, you got your little teddy bears that kids play with that are cute and cuddly. But these two bears just loved on each other. At the time of this, the light was still beautiful. We had the nice golden light shining on them. And you could see the glint in their eyes and such. And I know on the screen it's probably hard to see that. But this is a picture that will be up on my wall. It was just not only a phenomenal experience, but I just loved seeing these two bears cuddle. And it seems so foreign to us. So that was a fabulous thing. So that was the end of my photo tour, and I ended up staying 3 more days. I'm really abbreviating all of this, but I know that some of you all might want to go to bed tonight. But I ended up, after the bear tour was over, staying 3 more days. I spent my first night in Anchorage. We flew from Kenai to Anchorage, and then I headed toward Palmer. And I went to Lutna Lake, and did a bike ride, which was phenomenal. And a lot of these things you saw in my entry video, and I'm going to play again in a while. And that got to bike ended up biking about a total of 12 miles along the side of this lake and saw beautiful views. Then I headed on to Palmer and spent the night at a friend's house. And then my second day, I headed to Denali. And I don't know if you've heard this, but you only get to see the Denali about 30% of the time. Most of the time, Denali is covered in clouds. And I had been told by the pilot when we had flown back from Lake Clark that I had a good chance of seeing it that day, but I thought, that was 2 days back. How would he know? But sure enough, as I was getting close to Denali, I did get to see it. I wish I had planned for it. I probably would have allowed more time because I had a driving tour in Denali that I had to be there at a certain time for, and I would have looked for maybe some more locations, but I did get some pictures of Denali. But that's not what I'm sharing, but if you want to see them, they're on my website. So I went on into Denali. I decided I would camp there one night. So I did a driving tour. I got to go into mile 25 with my car. Mile 30, only 25 cars were allowed per day to do that. This is something they just started this year. I think part of it was because of the COVID, and got to see some phenomenal views, but I was really disappointed I didn't get to see any wildlife. And I wasn't there real early and I wasn't there real late, so that probably affected the amount of wildlife. So I headed back to my campsite and crashed on the picnic table. That was one of my favorite pictures that I was going to share with you. And then I cooked dinner and crashed pretty early. We had rain that moved in overnight. Next morning, the rain was coming and going. And I was just finishing breakfast when I looked over, and here came a moose cow with her calf right through the campsite right next to me. So I madly grabbed my camera and tried to stay pretty far back because a mama moose is not a happy mama moose if there's a calf around and you're nearby. So I stayed back and took a few pictures as they wandered through the woods. And then I decided I would take off hiking. And there was a trail that was near the campsites that I had seen several people taking. And right now I've drawn the blank of the trail name. But it was near the campground. And you started out walking up a railroad track, and then you went down into this valley area. And when I got there, there was only one other car there, and they were getting ready to leave. So I was pretty excited that I could be on the trail by myself. The day before, there had been lots and lots and lots of cars there. And I hadn't even stopped to check it out because of the number of cars. And sure enough, there was another mama moose with a calf walking up a creek bed. It's a real narrow creek bed. And she turned around and gave me a really good look like, don't you get any closer. And then took on off up the creek like she didn't even care I was there. I stayed pretty far back. On all this trip, I did have a really good zoom lens. So even though it looks like I'm close to a lot of this wildlife, I was pretty far back. I was using a Tamron 150-600. So you can be pretty far back and still look pretty zoomed in. And that's the safe way to do this because moose and bear and all these things are definitely not something to get too close to. So there's the mama moose looking at me. And let's see if I can get this to open up. She turned around and definitely gave me that look of, you're not getting any closer to me. You just stay away. But then she just meandered on up the creek bed. And I love this shot and that I look like I'm really close and I could get that look in her eyes that she was giving me of that look of warning, and which I heeded for sure. But I did follow them up the creek. I stayed pretty far back, and luckily it was a pretty open little area. And let's see if I can get these others to... There's the mama with a calf. Let's see here. There's the baby moose, which was so much fun. The baby, of course, didn't care I was around and was just going around grazing. And then when she went up to her mama, she even nursed for a while in front of me. And again, looks like I'm close, but I was real far back. I definitely respect my wildlife. But it was so much fun to get to see this calf oblivious to me coming up and just enjoying time with his mama and going around and grazing and such. So that was a pretty phenomenal experience. Let's see if I can get these turned off. Too many buttons to push. And we're down to my last picture. I know that we've been on for over 35 minutes. I was going to try to keep this at around 30 minutes because I'm sure there's things calling you all away. But I do appreciate all of y'all joining me this evening. Then my most favorite, I say my most favorite, I loved photographing the bears. I enjoyed everything I did. The most challenging thing was on my last day in Alaska. I wanted to see a glacier more than just from a boat, and I did get to see that, and I got to see a glacier calving, and I got to see glacier ice and such, which was phenomenal, but I wanted to really experience the glacier. And I had looked into Matanuska Glacier and had been told that I could hike it myself. And they had some little 2-hour tours, but you really didn't have time for photography. You were with big groups, so I thought, well, I might try this. Well, they decided about a month before I went that they were going to not allow that you could only go in as tour groups. And in retrospect, I think that was probably a good thing. I was probably pretty ignorant as far as safety in glaciers, and I probably would have been very timid and not gone very far and not gotten to experience much. So I started researching tour groups, and I found a phenomenal group. It was called Micah Guides, MICA. I'm not sure that they pronounce it Micah. I think it was. And I have never been so impressed with a tour group as I was with this group. It was all young people, college educated, with degrees in areas that were related, and they knew their stuff. Ended up in a small advanced tour group with just one other person and our guide, and we were probably skill level about the same point. We were close in age, which made it really nice, and we were both very, very interested in glaciers. And boy, did our guide, Baxter, provide the information that we were thirsty for. He never stopped talking. We were out, I think, 5 hours, and he was able to fill us with information about glaciers, fascinating information. It wasn't something that we were, oh, hush. It was fascinating information about glaciers. And as we hiked back through it, and we were dressed in full gear. I mean, we had harnesses on, we had hard hats on, we had gaiters on. We got strapped in. Every time we were going to go down a hillside and look into a crevasse or anything like that, he made sure that we were very safe. And what was the most fun was that we got to do some ice climbing. Let me show you a picture first of where I'm talking about. This was the Matanuska, and I think it was maybe 4 miles wide. I remember him talking about if a glacier is 4 miles wide, then it's 2 miles deep, which was fascinating to me. This definitely, like a lot of other glaciers, are receding. But that's back in there is where we were hiking, and we hiked pretty far back, and he let us do some ice climbing. And I told my husband, so it was probably about a 20-foot wall, but then when I got thinking about it and looking at the pictures, it was closer to maybe 40 feet, 50 feet that we ice climbed up. I actually, thanks Steve, I actually had to use an ice pick and crampons and dig my feet in. And at the very top, it really, really got steep and really got scary, but I did it, and I got up over top and was able to rappel on the other side. We had practiced rappelling at another location. So I rappelled down, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 feet. Obviously, I got a little off on my heights, but that was such a invigorating, exhilarating, phenomenal experience to get to experience a glacier in this way. I don't know in another 20 years what glaciers are going to be around, and I'm definitely in another 20 years not going to be doing ice climbing and rappelling. So I was thrilled to death that I got to have this experience, and I was thrilled that I had such a phenomenal guide. But this photo is one of my favorite photos of the trip. The clouds were just phenomenal. There was just touches of blue, and of course there was lots of blue in the glacier. There was clouds, reflections in the pools at the foot of the glacier. And I think obviously the fact that I got to experience that glacier firsthand, I'm sure affects my love of this picture. This is another one that I'm really excited about. I'm going to show you just real quick a few little things about my artwork. I printed just a few of these. I am going to be in Joplin at the Art Walk Thursday night at Spiva. And then on August 21st, we're having an event here at Coca Art Gallery for those of you that are local. John Hacker and I, John's going to be signing his newest book from the Joplin tornado, and also exhibiting his lightning photos. And I'm going to be exhibiting a lot of my Alaska artwork. We're calling it Lightning, Tundra, and Bears, oh my. So I hope you can attend that. That'll be 10 to 3 on the 21st. So I started getting things printed. I'm going to be taking my Alaska work to Joplin Thursday, which that was sort of a last minute thing. So I've been madly trying to get things ready. But I wanted to show you some options of what you can do. And I know the lighting isn't perfect for this. But obviously you can always have paper prints if you're interested in prints of any of this. These pictures or any of the others. Here is my bear's photo, and it's, I'm going to knock things over. The colors really aren't probably doing justice with this little light I have. But this is on canvas. This is a 12 by 18 canvas ready to hang. But I've also, and I haven't taken even out of the bag, this just came in, was it on metal, and I did it with a satin metal, and it's going to be so phenomenal. I love this bear picture. It just, something about it. So metal is an option. With my metals, I usually put on the back, or you can order it with a back from the company, a way that you can hang a wire and hang it. These just came in, so I haven't really had much time. But there's my little otter picture on metal. And he's wonderful. He is really, really wonderful. He was just perfect on metal. Eagle picture. Landing. Coming in. Let me turn off this Matanuska picture, and that'll give you a lot more room to see what I'm doing. And this is on canvas, again, ready to hang, 12 by 18. I also do the thicker stretcher bars on bigger size, like 16 by 24. I showed you earlier the one of Spire Cove. That was a 24 by 36 with a floater frame. This one is phenomenal. This was that around the bend. Boy, I wish the light would do this justice, but I wanted y'all to see what the options. I've put a floater back on this, an inch floater back. This is a 12 by 18 metal. But the neat thing is, if you go to my website, I offer all sizes, shapes, and then I will do custom orders. I just had somebody contact me about some custom orders today. If you want something framed, matted, If you want to pick it up locally, I've got all those options. So for those of you that have watched, I do have something special. If you go to this link, and my website's coralmartin.com, and it's Alaska-art-stories. And I've got something special there for you, like maybe 22% off of anything on my website. Obviously, the Alaska photos are the ones that I'm promoting a little bit right now. But this is just for those of you that have taken the time to watch my 40 minutes of video. I'm going to play real quick. I was meant to have this playing in the background while I was doing my last little bit of talking. But these are just a little bit of some of the captures that others have done of me while I was out capturing the photos that I've been sharing with you. It was a wonderful, wonderful adventure. I am going to quit talking now, but be sure to go to the coralmartin.com Alaska Art Stories and get your special gift. And I really appreciate each and every one of you. Anybody have a question real quick while we're going out with this video? I'm glad to answer any questions. I know this has run a little bit long, but I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about my journey to Alaska. I do hope that I'll get to return. I've already got a long list of places that I'd like to go back to, and places that well, that was the bike trail. Trying to video me biking was hilarious, but anyway. But it was just an absolutely phenomenal experience, and there's so much beauty. I've always loved Colorado, and I said this is Colorado on steroids, and it's different than Colorado, but I absolutely loved it up there. Don't think I could live up there because I don't think I could handle the dark and the very extreme cold in the winter, but I sure would love to spend more time up there. So I'm going to let this video finish out, and if you have any questions. Oh, thanks, Jane. I sure appreciate it. Oh, yeah, I bet you love the train tracks. I don't know, Ron, when I might go back. I would love to go tomorrow. Shall we go? You want to go with me? And Steve, thank you. I'm so glad you joined me. I couldn't see who all was following me, but Marta, thank you. I'm so glad to. And yes, Steve, Marta, Ron, all of you, I appreciate you following me all along on this journey. Most of you were with me as I was planning this trip. And then while I was on it, I tried to share as much as I could, but obviously I've been sharing a lot since I got back. So yeah, Ron, I'm ready to go. Let's get the plane tickets. And thank you, Marta, Steve, Ron, Jane, all of you that have joined me. I sure appreciate it. And you know where I am. If you can make it on the 21st, those of you, I think all of y'all that join me are local. It's going to be 10 to 3 here at the gallery, and I know John and I would love to have you, and I've got lots more stories to tell. And for my supporters, you'll be getting something special about invite for something that same day. There's my picture, exhausted, which I was, but I was exhilarated. So the video's done, so I think I'm done, and I really appreciate each and every one of you that joined me this evening. I'll check my messages if you have any questions, and I think I'm going to sign off. Thank you all. Take care. Appreciate each and every one of you. Good night.